By 1860, Louisiana held 18,647 free people of color, the largest, and among the wealthiest free black population in the Deep South. 10,000 lived in New Orleans, where people of African descent owned a third of the property in the French Quarter and read and wrote at a rate of 80% in a country where teaching an enslaved person to read was a crime. They were not freed by the Civil War. They were free before it, some for 4 generations before the United States even existed, and their surnames are French. This is a countdown of 16 surnames carried by Louisiana's free people of color, the gens de couleur libre, counting from 16 to 1. And this record breaks the pattern of everything these countdowns have covered before. So I need you to understand the world it comes from before I name a single family. Everywhere else in the American South, the law knew 2 categories, white and enslaved. Louisiana knew 3. Under French and then Spanish rule, from the founding of the colony through 1763 and beyond, there existed a legally recognized middle caste, free, propertied, French-speaking people of African descent who could own land, sign contracts, sue in court, run businesses, and pass their freedom to their children. They were not almost free, they were legally free, generations deep, while the rest of Black America was in chains. So where's the ledger? This is the part that changes how you search. For most Black American families, the records begin at the 1870 census, and everything before is a wall. For these families, the records run the other direction, backward, deep into the 1700s, because the Catholic Church wrote everything down. Every baptism, every marriage, every funeral of a free person of color was entered in a sacramental register in French or Spanish by name, with parents named going back generations. On top of that, sit the notarial records. New Orleans kept and still keeps an unbroken archive of civil acts, property sales, business contracts, wills, the freeing of slaves, in which free people of color appear as full legal actors. By name, decade after decade, picture the opposite of a brick wall. Picture a paper trail so continuous that some of these families can be traced further back than the white families around them. A free Creole family in New Orleans might be documented by name through an unbroken chain of baptisms and marriages and property acts, from the 1860s all the way back to the 1720s, while a white American family that arrived after the Louisiana Purchase can only be traced to 1803. That inversion is the single most important thing to understand about this record. For these families, the deep past is not lost. It is filed. 16 surnames. Number 16. Number 16. Carrière. Start with the arithmetic of freedom itself. In 1778, a woman named Marianne Thomas, herself the daughter and granddaughter of free people of color, married a man named Noel Carrière in the Catholic Church in New Orleans. Carrière was a captain in the Free Black Militia, a real military unit of free men of color that the colonial government armed and relied on. The couple had 10 children, and the free status of every one of those children rested on 3 generations of freedom that came before them. That is the thing to hold on to. By the time of the American Revolution, this was already an established, multi-generational free community with its own officer class. Carrière is one of its founding names. Number 15, Dédé. Edmond Dédé was born free in New Orleans in 1827, and he became a classical composer, a serious one. He trained as a violinist, and because the doors of the American musical world were closed to a black man, no matter how free or how gifted, he left for France in 1857, studied in Paris, and spent 27 years conducting the orchestra of a major theater in Bordeaux. He wrote symphonies and overtures. Sit with that against the backdrop of 1850s America. While the country debated whether black people were people, a free man of color from New Orleans was conducting a French symphony orchestra. The Dédé name is in the baptismal registers of the city he had to leave to become what he already was. Number 14, Nicole. Rose Nicole shows you how many of these families entered freedom in the first place. They bought it. Nicole was enslaved, and she built a small business selling coffee and calice, the sweet fried rice fritters of old New Orleans, on the streets around the French Market. She sold enough saved enough, and purchased her own freedom with her own earnings. She is remembered as the woman who effectively invented the New Orleans street coffee trade. Understand what that took: a system where an enslaved person could earn, keep, and accumulate money, and then buy herself out, a thing that was legally possible in Louisiana in a way it simply was not across most of the South. The name Nicole enters the free registers by purchase. Number 13, Lafon. Tommy Lafon was born free in New Orleans in 1810. He started by selling cakes to workers on the street. He opened a small store, taught school for a while, and then moved into money lending and real estate, and he was extraordinarily good at it. By the end of his life, he was one of the wealthiest black people in 19th century America, and he gave it away to Charity Hospital, to an old folks home that still bears his name, to a black order of nuns, and to the first black-owned newspaper in the South. He never married and left no children, so he poured the entire fortune into the community that made him. Lafon proves the ceiling this cast could reach: a street cake seller who died a millionaire philanthropist entirely before and after a war that never touched his freedom. Number 12, Rillieux. Norbert Rillieux was born free in New Orleans in 1806, and he changed the world without most of the world ever knowing his name. He was an engineer, and he invented the multiple effect evaporator, a system for boiling sugarcane juice under vacuum across several chambers that used a fraction of the fuel and produced a far better product. It became the foundation of the modern sugar refining industry, and the basic principle is still used in industrial evaporation today. A free man of color from Louisiana designed a piece of chemical engineering the entire global sugar economy adopted. He, too, eventually left for Paris. Rillieux is a French Creole surname attached to an American patent. Number 11, Roudanez. Jean-Baptiste Roudanez was 46 years old, the son of a French father and an African mother, and on the afternoon of March 3, 1864, while the Civil War was still being fought, he walked into the White House and handed Abraham Lincoln a petition. He and a younger man beside him were asking for the vote for every Louisianian of African descent born free before the rebellion. Roudanez later helped fund the New Orleans Tribune, the first black-owned daily newspaper in the United States, printed in French and English. This is a free man of color lobbying the President of the United States face-to-face in the middle of the war on behalf of a community that had been free and taxed and denied the vote for generations. Roudanez is the name that carried the demand to Lincoln's desk. Number 10, Berthineau. Arnold Berthineau stood beside Roudanez in that room. He was 27, a wine merchant, also the son of a French father and an African mother, and he co-carried that same petition to Lincoln, signed by the time it was done by around 1,000 free people of color. Here's what makes Berthineau matter beyond that day. 13 years later, in 1877, he filed one of the first federal lawsuits in American history, seeking to desegregate public schools. He lost, and worse, the ruling against him was later cited by the Supreme Court to help justify segregation. The Berthineau name is on the earliest legal fight for integrated schools in this country, 3/4 of a century before Brown versus Board. Quick thing, then straight back. If your surname has already come up, or you're 10 deep and still watching for it, subscribe now, because the last few names carry the hardest and most complicated truths in this entire record. And right after number 1, I'll show you exactly how to search these French and Spanish registers for your own family. It goes back further than you think, and it's mostly free. Number 9, Delille. Henriette. Delille was born free in New Orleans around 1813 into exactly the world this video describes, and she rejected the future it had planned for her. Young free women of color were often channeled into plaçage, formalized long-term relationships with wealthy white men. Delille refused, turned to the church instead, and in 1842 founded an order of black Catholic nuns, the Sisters of the Holy Family, who taught and cared for the enslaved and the elderly when no one else would. She is now formally on the path to Roman Catholic sainthood, one of the first black Americans ever considered. If she is canonized, the name DeLille, out of the free Creole registers of New Orleans, will belong to a saint. Number 8. Metoyer. Leave the city now because the greatest free black dynasty in America was rural. It begins with a woman born enslaved around 1742, known as Marie Thérèse Coin. She was freed, and with the French planter Claude Metoyer, she had a large family. Her children and grandchildren built a community on Île Brevel, along the Cane River near Natchitoches. By 1860, Isle Brevel held 89 free families of color who owned thousands of acres. Her son, Augustin Metoyer, built a Catholic church there in 1829 that still stands. The Metoyers owned Melrose Plantation, an estate worth over $100,000. The Metoyer name is the largest free family of color in the pre-war South, and it forces the hardest fact in this video, which is coming. Number 7. Coin. I am separating the founder from the dynasty on purpose because Marie Thérèse Coin deserves her own number. She was born into slavery at Natchitoches around 1742. Her African name, Coin, survived, which itself is rare, and tells you her family held on to its origins. After she was freed, she farmed her own land grant, raised tobacco and cattle, and bear grease for market, and systematically bought freedom for her own enslaved children one at a time, with money she earned herself. Everything at Isle Brevel grows out of one formerly enslaved African woman's refusal to leave any of her children behind. Coin is the origin point of the largest free black landholding family in the history of the American South. Number 6. Hadel. Along the German coast upriver from New Orleans, the Hadel family was free, and the historical record uses them to break a myth directly. There is a common assumption that every black person in Louisiana was either enslaved or the child of slaves, and that their surnames were simply the names of former masters. The Hadels are one of the families historians point to and say, no, their children were born free because their parents were already free. Some free families of color descended from people who arrived already free from Haiti after the revolution there, or who had been free in New Orleans before moving upriver. The Hadel name is a documented case that a French surname on a black Louisiana family is not proof of a master. Sometimes it is proof of the opposite. Number 5. Darensbourg. The Darensbourg name runs alongside the Hadels on the German coast, another of the free families whose children inherited freedom rather than earning it or being granted it, and the name itself tells a story. It descends from Carl Friedrich Darensbourg, a leader of the German settlers who came to Louisiana in the 1720s. When a family of color carries that name in freedom, it records a tangled colonial history, German, French, and African, braided into a single Louisiana surname across a century. This is why the free Creole registers are so genealogically rich. The names themselves are layered maps of who came to Louisiana and how the lines actually crossed, rather than how anyone later pretended they did. Number 4. Dumas. The Dumas name connects Louisiana's free people of color to one of the most famous names in world literature, and to the hardest question this community raises. Free families named Dumas were part of the propertied Creole world of New Orleans and the river parishes, and in that world, an uncomfortable number of free people of color were themselves slaveholders. This is not a footnote. Along the Cane River, the free Metoyer family owned hundreds of enslaved people. Free men of color in New Orleans bought and sold human beings. Some did it to purchase and protect their own relatives. Others did it purely as commerce. I am not going to hide this or explain it away. The gens de couleur libre were a free people inside a slave society, and some of them participated in slavery. The record holds both truths at once. Number 3. Laveau. Marie Laveau was born free in New Orleans around 1794, a free woman of color, and she became the most famous practitioner of voodoo in American history, though the caricature has almost entirely buried the person. The real Marie Laveau was a devout Catholic, a hairdresser to wealthy white women, a nurse during yellow fever epidemics, and a figure of real power and charity in her community. Her free status, her property, and her family are documented in the same civil and church records as everyone else on this list. She is proof that the free Creole world was not only planters and composers and inventors, it was also spiritual leaders, working women, and figures of genuine folk authority. Laveau is one of the most recognized names to come out of this entire community, and one of the most misunderstood. Number 2, Bechet. The free Creole world did not end at the war. It flowed directly into the culture that changed the planet. Sidney Bechet, the great early jazz clarinetist and soprano saxophonist, one of the first important jazz soloists ever captured on record, ahead of almost everyone including Louis Armstrong in some accounts, came out of the French-speaking Creole Catholic world of downtown New Orleans, the same Treme and 7th Ward families whose ancestors filled these free registers. This is the piece people miss about the birth of jazz. It was not one stream. The Creole side of it brought the formal training, the ability to read music, the European instruments and harmony, and that meant the blues. And the African rhythmic tradition coming up from the uptown and rural black community, and the collision made something new. The gens de couleur libre were on the trained side of that collision. Their literacy, their conservatory-style music lessons, their pianos and clarinets were a direct inheritance from the free antebellum world this whole video describes. When you hear a New Orleans clarinet bend and cry, you are hearing the descendants of the free registers. Bechet is the sound this community turned itself into. Number 1, Plessy. It has to be him. Omer Plessy was born in New Orleans in 1862 into a French-speaking Creole family of color that had been free before the war. He grew up during Reconstruction in a brief window when black men in Louisiana could vote, when schools were integrated, when interracial marriage was legal, and then he watched all of it be stripped away. In 1892, a New Orleans Civil Rights Committee of Creole men, the Comité des Citoyens, chose Plessy to challenge the state's railroad segregation law precisely because he was a free-born Creole of color, so light-skinned that the injustice would be undeniable. He bought a first-class ticket, sat in the whites-only car, and refused to move. He was arrested at the corner of Press and Royal Streets. The case became Plessy versus Ferguson, and in 1896, the Supreme Court used it to bless separate but equal segregation across America for the next 58 years, until Brown versus Board of Education finally overturned it. Hold the whole shape of that. A man descended from generations of documented freedom, free in Louisiana when most of Black America was enslaved, became the name the United States attached to the legal machinery of Jim Crow. The free Creole world produced the plaintiff, and the country turned him into a synonym for segregation. And in 2022, 130 years after his arrest, the state of Louisiana finally, formally pardoned Homer Plessy. Now the science, because people always ask what a DNA test can tell them about a claim like this. It can measure something real, because Louisiana's free Creole community married within itself for generations. Free people of color marrying other free people of color, as the records show again and again. Creole ancestry often carries a distinctive genetic signature, a specific braid of West African, French, and Spanish European, and in many families a real Native American thread reflecting Louisiana's actual colonial history. Autosomal DNA can pick up that mixture and connect you through shared segment cousin matching to others descending from the same Cane River or New Orleans lines. For families whose oral history says we were always free, DNA can sometimes confirm the mixture is old and deep, exactly as an 18th century free line would predict. And now the honest word, because this channel does not deal in wishful thinking, and this topic needs it more than any other. A DNA test cannot tell you your ancestors were free. Let me be very clear about that, because it is the single most common mistake made with this history. Genetic admixture, European and African ancestry mixed together, is the norm for African Americans generally. It is the legacy of slavery itself, and it says nothing about whether any particular ancestor was free or enslaved. A French surname does not prove free ancestry either. Enslaved people in Louisiana were also given French names, also baptized Catholic, also appear in these same church registers as property. The name Metoyer or Dumas or Laveau on your family tree is a lead pointing you toward the Louisiana records. It is not by itself proof of a free line, and there is a harder honesty underneath that one. Free before the Civil War is not automatically a prouder ancestry than enslaved until 1865. This community's freedom sometimes rested on owning other human beings. Around 1,500 free men of color initially fought for the Confederacy before the city fell. Freedom in a slave society was a compromised, fragile, sometimes complicit thing. The point of tracing it is not to find a better class of ancestor. It is to find the true one. So here's how to search it, and it goes deep. Start with the Archdiocese of New Orleans sacramental records, the baptism, marriage, and funeral registers. Many of them abstracted and published in a multi-volume series that specifically indexes free people of color and the enslaved by name in French and Spanish back into the 1700s. Then use the New Orleans Notarial Archives, one of the richest civil record collections in North America, where you can find the actual act of manumission, the document that freed your ancestor, along with their property sales and wills. For the Cane River families, the Cami Henry Research Center at Northwestern State in Natchitoches holds the Isle Brevel record, and the 1860 census, free on Family Search, has a column most people ignore. It marks free people of color as free by household, by name the year before the war. Tell me in the comments which surname and which parish: Orleans, Natchitoches, St. Landry, Point Coupé, St. Martin. Name the parish, because in Louisiana, the parish is what separates two free families who happen to share a French name. Next video, we do the thing this record makes uniquely possible. We take one free family of color and follow the notarial trail backward, from an 1860 census line to the marriage in the church register to the actual notarized act of manumission that turned an enslaved ancestor into a free one. And we read the document that made a family free. One paper. Wait until you see what it says.